Hello, everyone, and welcome to our SIG today, the Pre-College System Dynamics Society SIG. We are really fortunate to have Tracy Benson come and talk to us. She has so much experience working with systems thinking and pre-college education. And today she's going to talk to us about the work that she has done with administrators who are a really tough nut to crack. So she has a lot of experience and has done a lot of training that she's going to share with us. So I'd like to give it to Tracy. Go ahead, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana. And it's great to see everyone. And thank you for taking this time to come together. My goal is to really make this a learning experience for all of us. And thank you, Diana, for such the nice introduction. I'm really representing not just the work that I've done, but the work that our Water Center has done, including our advanced facilitator credentialed folks, and of which Don DeLand here is one of them. So he's part of our team. And so appreciate seeing him there and all of you. So I'm going to share my screen because I've got some visuals so that you just don't have to hear me, but also be able to see. So I really see this as like igniting the fire. Like we light a match, and how can it generate other sparks, both at a variety of levels of education administration. The school in the US, we call groups of schools school districts. We also are working at state level departments of ed, and also some national, the National Department of Ed. We've had an opportunity to do some presentations at that level as well. And so my goal is to share experiences, recommendations, and lessons learned. So the focus will be really to look at, how do we develop this interest? How do we help people really see the value of systems thinking and invest time? And I always tell them, give yourself the gift of time to learn this, because it's going to be such an opportunity for you as a leader to really make differences in your system. So this diagram kind of shows you a little bit of the space that we try to create when we work, not just with administrators, but pretty much everybody. But I'm applying it specifically to administration here. And at the center is we have content. So we have systems thinking concepts, habits, and tools. We ask people to make connections between that and their work and their life, that there isn't an on and off switch. It's about becoming a systems thinker through making those connections, and also to make connections with other learners. So it's not a solo effort. That really is, we encourage groups and diverse groups of administrators to be able to work and learn together. And that develops that sense of community, that community of practice that develops over time, so that we gradually take ourselves out of the mix of the facilitator and turn the learning over to the group. So they kind of wean off of like that consultant role. And then that outside kind of loopy thing is that the learning generates greater application of systems thinking to educational administration. The ideas don't necessarily come from us. They come from the learners and saying, oh, I can do that. And I'm going to show you some examples of surprising applications that administrators have made. And then also the idea of cross-sector collaboration. Being a principal, and I can speak with this from a personal experience, can be a really lonely job. And so to be able to develop principals working with district administrators, principals working with other principals, directors of professional development, also working with directors of HR. So administration at all levels. And recently, we've had the opportunity to work with kind of the non-academic side of the house and school districts, administration that is about operations, facilities, nutritional services, transportation, and so on, and help them see how their administrative roles can actually directly impact student achievement and student success. So I'm going to be dealing mostly with the academic side of the house, but just know that that cross sector is important. And so just to give you a geographical scope of our work with educational administrations, I told Diana earlier that I spent a long time just going over the 34 years we've been doing this work. I began learning about systems thinking and system dynamics as a school administrator. So to date, we've had either contracts or conferences providing virtual and in-person with 33 of the 50 US states, including Guam in connection with Hawaii. And then you can see the countries outside of the states, some of which are represented right here. Go Turkey. So impressed with the work that you're doing for pre-service teachers. Just love that. And then our Thinking Tool Studio is an online learning platform that we developed that was extremely active, especially starting with the COVID shutdown. And so we have pre-college educators and administrators that are users of that site from all 50 states. And we're like new countries every day, 80 plus countries from outside. I have a QR code so you can go to that particular site. I also, in chat, I was going to put that right now. I'm going to put that, copy it, and put it in chat so that you can directly have the connection to that site. And so I'm going to bring George Richardson in today. He's been one of our mentors, a longtime mentors from the very beginning, towards the very beginning of our work. And we were at the point where we were saying, how do we get people, to invest time? Because this takes time to really change the way you think and to learn the visual tools of systems thinking, everything from feedback loops to connection circles, icebergs and stock and flow mapping. And he said to us, you have to have a lot of doors. You have to know what door people will most likely enter, what will entice them to come into the room. It's kind of like, which kind of bait do you want on your hook to be able to catch that fish and reel it in? And so I wanted to use that metaphor from George and share some of the doors that we've discovered that have really worked. Our most popular resource that has been, I think this is like the 4th edition that we have, are these Habits of a Systems Thinker cards. And we have them in digital versions, which I don't know, Diana, if you can put that in the chat, copy and put that in the chat for me, that would be great if you can. If
Is
not,
that the second item that you have
yes.
in your?
And it says
okay.
card. It's actually the first. It says cards. It's actually the first.
Okay.
And but these sets we have sold or distributed over, we're well over 200,000, and then that doesn't include the online. We have the digital cards freely available online, and we're doing new languages constantly. So right now I think we're up to 11, and that has helped increase the accessibility of what systems thinking is about. Instead of providing a definition, we'll say, hey, if you're interested in systems thinking, look at these habits of thinking, pick ones that have some meaning to you that you actually think you might be pretty good at. Think about how you put that into practice. And that's a door to open. These cards right now are also being used by a growing number of medical schools. The AMA has published them in a health system science book. And companies like General Electric and others and Shell Oil are using them as well. So they become really popular unexpectedly. The tools, of course, it's looking at, what tool will help administrators deal with some of the challenges that they have. So, not necessarily asking them to digest all at once, but listening to their challenges and saying, this might be helpful for you. Let me draw your story that you're telling, your challenge, in a feedback loop, and see if that story makes sense to you, and how might that help you understand it in a different way. So that's a door, definitely. Learning by doing is truly, I think, essential. So I had so many pictures to choose from. but I chose this one because I had a great call with Chris Brown from Australia yesterday. And together with Anne Levine, a former Waters staff person, consultant and staff person, and Chris and we had talks about how can we take John Sturman and Linda Booth Sweeney's research around understanding stocks and flows and make it experiential. So this is a group of administrators that are doing some challenges on stocks and flows. There's an inflow manager and an outflow manager, and trying to generate certain changes in the stock using water, actual water. And it was super fun, and it really helped make it concrete for them. And then lastly, the other door, well, it's not lastly, I have some others, is word of mouth. We at the Waters do not have any marketing budget line. We just really trust that the benefits that people receive as administrators will share with others, and that will open doors. And we support that sharing in many ways. So I mentioned the habits. So that's one way. And we oftentimes when we do a workshop, we'll give 2 sets of cards and say, one's for you and one's to share with someone else that you work with that might not be here. And that way it gives them practice explaining, and it also helps get that spread, get the word out. We also have those pocket sets of cards that are new. Those were developed by student leaders from Oregon State University. They wanted a smaller version, and they, after we developed them, that's when the medical schools grab those and say, those are going to be our white coat pocket cards. So they carry them in their white coats to help them remember, especially using the questions on the back of the cards. And so on the right is a matrices that administrators use to, like at a particular date, let's say we're meeting, and which habits have you been putting into practice? Tell us a story about how that went. The delta is, what habits are you working on? Which, how would you like to change your thinking to make that habit of thinking a little bit more prevalent, and to share those out, especially in like a professional learning community or community of practice of administrators who meet regularly together, which we encourage. Other doors are work stories. To the left is asking people to talk about a challenge without even using the term systems thinking, and then say, let's see if we can see this from a variety of perspectives, or let's talk about some possible next steps that could be leveraged in helping you decide that. So using the language within a work story can help open up the door and saying, oh, we have some tools for that if you're interested. On the top right, this is what I'm hearing most often lately amongst administrators. It's so busy. I have no time to think. If I could just be able to pause and have some time to think and reflect with others through this systems thinking lens, it's really going to actually help me, carve out more time, because I'm going to work a little smarter and not harder. Well, we're hearing that quite often. And then in the virtual world, because we've been doing a lot of virtual, not just in person, we've been using a platform called Miro, and this is like a zoom out example of one administrative group that's been using this for synchronous and asynchronous practice, so they can see the work that one another is doing. This is kind of a beginning one. So there's in other parts, there's stock flow map spaces, there's connection circle spaces, ladder of inference spaces, so spaces for each tool, so we can get in as a group together in a synchronous way, and also in work their own time. So I'm going to pause for a second and say, as far as those doors, can people think about some other doors that you've used to get administrators interested in coming in the room and being enticed with learning system thinking? Alan, yeah. Alan, by the way, your book now, has been a door. I just want you to know that, because we've been sharing that, and administrators, when they see the teachers sharing that with them, they're all in. So,
thank you for mentioning that. In our school district in Massachusetts, we started with almost exclusively classroom mentoring, and almost without fail, after the teachers would work with the systems for a while, they'd say, is the administration doing any of this? And so it was kind of a bottom up way to get to the administration. I don't know if you've seen a lot more of that.
I'm going to show some examples of that, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because we've seen students of all ages really push that envelope and see that loop that systems thinking in the classroom reinforces systems thinking in the organization, and organization reinforces classroom practice as well. So thank you for bringing that up, Alan.
Yeah, one thing that happened was we started taking on issues by doing round tables. And my colleague Rob Quadden and I, who were mentors at the time, thanks to the Waters Foundation, would facilitate roundtables. And so we took on a couple of really important issues for teachers, looking at them in a systems way. One was a problem we were having with copying, and the administration was limiting the amount of copying teachers could do, and the number of copies were going up. And so it was pretty obvious it was one of those things like building a new road and you get more traffic. So you got a counterintuitive way that people were sneaking around, or, trying to find underground ways to do copying. Another was when we were switching it from having using our school library as a special activity where teachers would get release time, to making it a resource center. And it was also when computers were gaining more traction in schools. And so we were trying to transition to an always open library rather than a teacher having a 45-minute or 30-minute block to take her or his class there. And so we got people together and talked about how we would like the library to look. So having teachers participate in administrative issues like that, I found was very powerful. And then, luckily we had an administration that was quite receptive to systems as well.
I agree. Some of our most successful ongoing work has been when teachers and administrators together are in those professional development sessions, and we call them instructional learning teams, and or site-based learning team, site-based leadership teams and such. So really honoring teacher leaders along with administrators working together. It's huge leverage. Yeah, I see that as well. So I have 4 lessons learned plus practices that I would avoid based on some things that didn't work so well for us that I would like to share. So I'm going to be brave and be extremely transparent with you. And so here's number 1, and that is that assume that people are already systems thinkers to some degree, and build on those self-identified strengths. The term systems thinking can be problematic. It can, I've seen people's eyes roll back in the head saying, a workshop on what? And so we really try to borrow from Chris Cooperrider's work on appreciative inquiry. And that is that it's important to discover first your own systems thinking strengths. So one of the first exercises we do with those cards is pick 2 strengths. Pick 2 that you can tell a story about, like I had referred to today. And then you build on that as you develop your systems thinking know-how. And then to dream by imagining goals or new collaborative ways to lead schools' excellence. And then to design structures for systems thinking practice. And that could be not only for yourself as a leader, but for that practice to spread throughout your school system and or district system or state or national system. And then lastly, to deliver by focusing on leverage actions to generate desired results. And those leverage actions are informed by that deeper understanding of the structures of your understanding how your system works. So building on the strengths, it's not a deficit model, it's the glass half full model, not half empty. The second is to develop systems thinking practice as a noun. through the verb, you need to practice. So provide opportunities for meaningful practice. So we really ask, what are some things that you're working on in schools? Here's some examples of administrators learning, and actually this was an administrative team with teacher leaders together looking at things that were important to their school, having to do with parent involvement and teacher satisfaction and equity, and then also providing opportunities for, on the left, to talk through their stories of how they put the habits into practice. We do not use direct instruction. We use a constructivist approach to learning and being able to see those habits in day-to-day life. We've developed a workbook called Systems Thinking as Practice that we use in our variety of workshop settings and also, any kind of professional development. The other piece is that practice. We just had a webinar last week. I think, Diana, were you there at the Twin Rivers webinar? Yeah, and I don't know if Will shared this, but Will is one of our principals who also was on the district impact systems thinking impact team. They developed like a trainer of trainer impact team to develop their own capacity to do ongoing professional development internally. And I just love this example because the way he says it in his own words is that this group of girls just got into it, and they were like really escalating in their arguments, and their voices were getting louder. I believe it was during a lunch period, and they were sent to the office. And Will, the principal, was there, and he said, well, tell me what's going on. And they're all talking at the same time. He pulled out his whiteboard and just started drawing what he was hearing and what he was sensing, and then said to the girls, so is this what's going on? And he talked through the loops. All of a sudden the emotion flushed out, and they started pointing at different parts of the loop that were right or the wrong, and actually analyzing what they were doing, what was happening with the conflict. And it resolved itself. The map helped take that emotion out, and the girls ended up coming to a resolution as to what they should do more of and less of, as instead of getting punished. And so I thought that was a great example with a principal that's just using that just in real time as his practice. And he said to me, I don't know if this is right or not, but it certainly worked. And I said, don't worry about the right or wrongness. If it worked, that's a good thing. And so number 3, and this is a design thing that's been somewhat more intentional for us. And that is that when you're doing a professional development group, and I've worked with administrative groups of up to 100 people in one room, which is not good. I would not recommend that. Because you have to create moments, which will be number 4 that I'm going to go to next. But to design it so that people have interaction with one another. It's not just to sit at the same table and talk to the same people for a half a day or for a whole day. Get people out of the seats and get them interacting with one another. That's that building that sense of community. So we intentionally look at, depending on group size, at least with large groups, 50% of the participants will interact with at least, all of the participants will interact with at least 50% of other people. So I gave you some examples. And the ways we do it is for those habits cards, we have big, giant 2x3 vinyl posters. For large groups, we put around the room, and even for smaller groups. So when people pick their 2 strengths cards, pick one of those and move to that poster and find a partner and tell your story. Then go to the second card, move to that poster and tell your story. We use jigsaw methods quite a bit, where you put a little symbol on name tags or handouts. You mix people up through experiential exercises like the ones that are in the Systems Thinking Playbook and others, to really get people talking to one another. And then at the end of the day, tell them that's the design. That, look around the room. How many people have you had a conversation with? Now, this last closing, stand up, look for someone you haven't spoken to yet, and meet up and experience the closing exercise with them. So that's just some ideas for that. And for virtual space, I know most of you know that breakouts can be randomly assigned. You can create them ahead of time and have people choose based on topic or based on the role they play, and get people meeting with different people virtually. And then number 4 borrows from the work of Chip and Dan Heath. Has anybody read this book, Power of Moments? Oh, it's fabulous. So what it is, it's like making that, especially that first engagement, fun. We look for laughter, because there's something very neurological about that. When learning is fun and we can see some humor and actually have that physical experience of laughter, it just clicks into your emotional side of that's important when you're looking at something new and you're having the courage to experience something new. And then to create powerful, memorable moments. And this is where this work of Chip and Dan Heath, that elevation, insight, pride, and connection are the elements. So these are their questions from their book. What if a teacher could design a lesson that their students would remember? And I'm going to share with you examples of former students that are now in their 40s that are facilitators of ours as adults in the business world and in the medical world and in the educational world. So the question I'm holding is, what if a systems thinking encounter could generate a moment that would be compelling and long-lasting interest that would cause that to happen? And so here's some ways to do that. Design conditions for light bulb moments. And I'm so cheesy that we even have these light bulbs, these little paper light bulbs that we put on tables and say, when you have a light bulb moment, you can either show it or write it down and put it in your book so you remember. And the light bulb moments are about new insights, or like, I never thought about that before. Or, oh, I can use this with such and such, or I'm going to repeat this exercise with my staff. We hear that all the time. To rewire understanding in order to create some insight. And so and this is just one tool, is the iceberg can help people deepen their understanding, gain new insight. Asking powerful, reflective, open-ended questions can also help people, examine and their own ideas and be open to change. Validating people whenever possible when you're working with them, so that there's some courageous efforts to take some risks, to be vulnerable, and to be proud of that vulnerability. So I just use the example, again, there are many, but stock flow mapping can help with that, especially by looking at the progress of a key stock that they want to focus on to see change over time, and to use behavior over time graphs to monitor the changes of that stock over time. And then the last from the Heath brothers is connection. And again, I've already talked about that, how you can design for collaboration, networking. We say that systems thinking is not a solo sport. It's a team sport. And so to get together and do this together. So really quickly, this is what doesn't work from our experience. Don't mandate it from the top. We tried that. And people came in reluctant, like, oh my gosh, is this the new, theme of the month? And Mr. Waters would always tell us, don't spend a lot of time trying to get the train out of the station. Just go with moving trains. So start with the early adopters and let them, through their practice, through their modeling, through their experiences, through their word of mouth, grow that over time. One and dones don't work. One and done is when you teach one workshop and there's no other plan after that, or you do one presentation and there's no plan after that. We don't do those anymore. We really don't. We always look for that follow-up, which is the next one. And the follow-up is about some plan for coaching support, expectations, practice, because if you don't have those things, it really does fail to make a difference. And so that's important. Teaching the plan versus teaching the participants. And if you saw the mess of my slides right now, like I'm going through my plan, but I've got a plan B and a plan C, depending on what goes on. but customization is essential. So we learn what a district is working on. We learn, oh, you're doing project-based learning? Okay, that's important for us to know. Oh, you're doing this MTSS intervention strategy, which is a US, I don't know if, I think it's just a US thing right now. Okay, we can use that language. So we customize to what a school or a district is working on. And then sharing examples that have nothing to do. So the first example that I learned when my first entry into this work as an administrator was Stella 1.0, a workshop. And we spent a half a day on population models. And I thought it was pretty cool. But then I stepped away and said, what in the world am I going to do with this? I don't know how this connects. So find things that are relevant to people's work. And so that's what doesn't work. So I'm going to just take a breath here, and I might just kind of, I have a few different examples, and then I'm going to stop and we'll open up the conversation because I know I'm going over time. This is a very first stock flow mapping experience for a group of high school administrators. This district, and we work a lot with highly challenged districts that tend to be in high need areas in states across the US and in other countries around the world. Chronically absent students has been a huge issue, especially post-COVID. So we just introduced stocks and flows and then talked about what are the things that would open or close those flows. And they just went crazy on this, as you can see. But then they used the map to say, so how could this map help us identify how to be more proactive, how to keep students wanting to attend versus even getting to that stock of chronically absent. And so it shifted their whole conversation about getting kids back in school to that proactive approach of how do we keep kids and help them want to be in school. So that was a huge aha. That was a light bulb moment. This one is one of my favorites. So what we did is we took district data, very untechy, on chart paper. And so you can see there's 3 data points. The green is their enrollment. So this is a fairly good sized district of like 30 to 32,000 students. Their graduation rates, those are percentages, and their suspension rates, which were super high. And in 2013, that's when they became a district. This district had 4 failing school districts that were unified. And so Dr. Martinez came in July of 2013, and that's when we started in 2014, bringing systems thinking into administration and leadership. And what we did with this, the strips of paper, that first one, Tracy B., that's me. Underneath, you see Cindy. These are the x-axis years. And we had a whole team. In the finished product, you'll see like 12 other strips of paper underneath, each with a person's name, where they write what they were doing in the district at the time, which then generated what was happening at the district at the time. So they were really calling out what were some of the conditions that generated those changes in those key variables, and what other variables were changing over time that were that they didn't have hard data, but qualitative data. And so I don't have a picture of the end product because that was somewhat private. They wanted me not to share that. But it was using behavior over time graphs to facilitate. It was really like a half a day awareness of where they've been, where they are, and where they hope to be, and how would that matter. I'm going to stop. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay, so I have 2 more examples of things that has really helped us, and then I'm going to stop and really open up the group for conversation. And that is this particular district that I had mentioned created their own impact team, and there were 4 different roles that people played. That there was basically a trainer of trainer for these. Our role was doing the trainer of trainer. Their role was to do the work in the district. There were leadership coaches, so principals and district administrators had systems thinking coaches. They had workshop facilitators. The systems thinking facilitators were based on situations and conditions that people needed a thought partner with. And so that was open. So it wasn't necessarily a coaching relationship, but a coaching service. And then they really wanted the student leaders to be developed especially in secondary, because they had student leadership classes. And so that curriculum systems thing, it was woven into that curriculum as well. So I just wanted to share that idea. And that was huge. I think we had 35 people involved with these roles. And they're still, it's changed a little bit, but they're still doing that work to some degree in that district. Here's the student part, Alan. This is huge. So that school in Tucson, that book was produced by the Creative Learning Exchange, yet the video research was produced on the behalf of a Kellogg grant, where we interviewed students in middle school and then years later when they were in their career. So the guy that's with the arrow is now the pediatric ER physician, emergency medicine in our largest hospital in Tucson. And he's done presentations for us. But he has students that are in the school that he went to. And so as a parent, he has been able to encourage the ongoing systems thinking applications in classrooms. And this particular school district in Tucson, after 34 years, they still have workshops for new teachers and new administrators. And so, they have rubrics that they use. And in some schools, they even have narrative report card pieces about where kids are in terms of systems thinking concepts and tool use. The person in the center, David Mandel, was in this video, in that book. He became a high school principal, then started working for College Board, and he is now one of our advanced facilitators. And so he's working with schools and districts and is going to be a district level administrator very soon. And then on the bottom, this is students. One of our institutes, a student team came with some adults, and they were learning side by side with adults. This was one of the student council representatives that after they left that institute in Milwaukee, they came back to Tucson and said, we really want to build some maps around what we see as student success. So on a Saturday morning, we volunteered to work with them. They developed this giant map on student success, presented it to their school board, and the school board was blown away. And they said, why isn't every student in our district, being able to do that? So that was students really giving that, that impetus, just one example of many. And then lastly, the puffball theory. So, and this gets to do with the word of mouth, but when educators get promoted to administrative positions, or administrators transfer to other school districts, or when they even become authors or bloggers, this particular one retired. This person was administrator of the year, superintendent of the year in the state of Missouri in 2019. He's one of our advanced facilitators now. He has a blog a podcast and also a book. And he features systems thinking as a common red thread throughout. Our habits are in his book. The puffball of one school district, as people get promoted and move over the last decade to others, we have work in all of these. The greens are school districts. The purple is the Sacramento County of Education, Office of Education, and the blue is the California Association for School Business Officers. And Camp Snowball kind of helped make that happen too, to kind of generate that. And we're thinking about bringing Camp Snowball back. So, this is a rubric that we use for school administrators as well, self-assessment, and that really helps them see where they're at. And I'm way over, so maybe I should just stop, Diana, and let you. I'm so sorry I went so long.
That's the beauty of having one speaker. And in a systems thinking setting, not systems thinking, but in a SIG meeting setting where we have a lot more flexibility. Wow. Does anyone have any questions, comments, things they would like to say to Tracy? about what she presented? Steve?
Yeah, God, it's so many things, Tracy, but I'm just going to focus on one. You said at one point that the administrators you had worked with said that it was really important to have time to reflect on things. And I've had the same experience. I worked for many, many years as a coordinator of a science department, tried to bring ideas, into the classrooms of the people that I worked with. We had workshops. I would support people with the use of Stella and that kind of thing. There was a lot of excitement, but it faded very quickly. And I always felt that a lot of the reason for that was that we never had time to really sit and think about what it was we were doing. So my question really is, how have you worked with schools to create that, to help administrators figure out how to create that time to reflect?
And it's everybody. I mean, it's just not everybody needs that time for reflection, students as well. So I think that, well, first of all, you have to build the perceived value of that, because to protect time to think and reflect, you have to do that on your calendar. So to do it on the electronic calendar is one. Others have made meetings never 1 hour, always 50 minutes. So at least there's 10 minutes to kind of, okay, what did I hear? What, just be able to, especially with Zoom, that those 50 minutes is important. Getting off campus, going to get a cup of coffee, and just because when you're off campus, somebody else has to deal with some things, right? So that's another. Summertime is also a really good time. And then little check-ins, I think, so we use Padlet also, and, little library resources where keeping an article super short or super read and say, hey, I think this could be really helpful, but it's got to be short, but it gives those little reminders that, okay, reflection and thinking is important. So we try to do that as well. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, as you were saying that, I remember actually 2 years in a row, we would have these retreats, and I arranged to have a local inn in town put us up for the day for free. They would do it. And they were the best retreats ever, because people could walk around on the grounds and talk to each other without having to think about what they were doing back at school.
Yeah. Yeah. Really strong.
Well, thank you, Steve. And Tracy, I'm more than excited about your presentation. It was just wonderful. There's so much we can learn from the work that the Water Center has done, and the whole opening doors and the different ways people can get into the learning of systems thinking. I think all of those things are really important, and we've got to figure out kind of how to do that a little bit on our end, which is much more geared to the stock flow part. But hopefully what you have created by this body of people who are starting to have an appreciation for what systems thinking can bring to them will spread to allow them to look at other things differently and provide opportunities for students to see this, because I definitely think that Forrester was right. You get to the students, that's where you're going to actually make a change. And a lot of adults will pay attention, a lot of educators, because they have an appreciation for students. When they see what kids can do, they're pretty darned impressed by their ability to think through some pretty serious problems when they have developed some tools and use of tools and techniques for analyzing.
And I would also add, this is another door, is parents. And so
Yes.
Parents really have influence, and like I mean, just last week, I had a parent who's a friend and also one of our facilitators. She was talking to her superintendent, and she set up a lunch, and then she couldn't attend. So it was just the superintendent and me for an hour. And it was like, okay, I needed to create one of those moments, right? It's like a sales hat. And he's all in, and she made that difference. And then I think about all the people that are parents in the society. And the question is, so how can we influence school systems to be interested in this as parents? And I, I don't know. I mean, just from our experience, a resource that is very accessible, that they can see in every day-to-day, even parenting, like the habits. We have some pictures that look like parents on those cards that they can relate to, and then use that to help.
So if I can make a suggestion, one of the things I did when I was a teacher was the parents would come to back to school night, and they would go through their child's day, each course that the child was their child was taking. And I would just explain it to them, this extra piece that I was adding to the class to give them an exposure. I think eighth grade back to school night, when the eighth grader parents are coming to the school to decide, whether they want to send their child there or what the school's about or something, having something there about the systems thinking piece. So there are places to interact, and actually also parent-teacher conferences. I used to talk to specific parents when their child had done something especially, I don't know, useful with systems thinking, or actually for me, it was the modeling piece, but suggesting to parents that their child I think would have a special aptitude for something, to get the parents thinking about this. So there are places as a teacher where you have interactions with parents that you can actually capitalize on sharing this with parents. And I never once in the 20 years that I did this used system dynamics modeling with my students. Never once did I have a parent complain, even though at the time they didn't know quite what was going on, when their kids were doing this. And I had a lot of parents say, I wish I had learned this when I was in school. So parents can be very, very helpful, especially also going back to the administration and saying, my kid's doing some interesting things in class. So I think you have a lot of wonderful ways you have grown your program, and we have a lot that we can learn from you. So thank you so much for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. As I said, it really really helped me have that reflection time over the past 3 decades.
That's great.
So it's really wonderful.
I don't want to cut this short, but I have something from Tim Joy. If I want to give Tracy the maximum opportunity to answer any questions here.
Chat would work too. So in chat or follow up, I can also put my Calendly link. And if anybody wants to meet up, be happy to meet, one-on-one or whatever later. So I can do that in chat, but you go ahead.
Okay, great. So Tim Joy was an early adopter of system dynamics modeling as an English teacher at a high school, which blew me away. My kids loved him. He was their English teacher at the high school they went to. He became an administrator of a Catholic at a private high school for students who had, they were from lower socioeconomic groups and usually came into the special school that was set up 1 to 1.5 years behind in math and or reading. And I asked him if he could present as well, but he, although not a principal still at the school, he's still working and he could not come and talk to us. But he sent me some paragraphs and I made some slides up from his paragraphs and I sent it to him. So I don't know if we have enough time left, but I'd like to show you some of the slides on his reflections as someone who had used system dynamics modeling in his courses, and he also taught a modeling course at a previous high school, and then having that background becoming a principal. So if you will allow me, I would like to share some slides with his information. Let me do this. Okay. So these are some ways he has used systems thinking as an administrator, and he was the principal for 11 years at this school. It's De La Salle North Catholic High School in Portland, Oregon. Racially diverse population. They were interested in going to college, but they were from a Portland area that would not have access to faith-based rigorous college prep education. They had 220 students. They have currently 220 students. That's about what they've had over the last, I think they've been school for about 15 years. 50% of their education is financed by corporate work. In other words, students go to school for 4 days a week, and they are interns in a business area in a local region 1 day a week. So they have to learn how to dress. They have to learn how to talk. They have to learn how to present themselves well in a business arena. And those businesses actually help pay for part of their education. There's a maximum family income to be able to attend the school. For example, two-person household has to have a maximum income of $40,000, and it goes kind of like that if three-person income, a three-person household, etc. Students are usually actually 1.5 to 2 years behind grade level in math and or reading, but 98% of them are accepted, students are accepted to college over their 23-year history. I'm sorry about this information at the bottom, and I can't turn that off right now. So some books that he found especially helpful were Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows, a beautiful book, well written by a wonderful communicator and just brilliant woman. And The Global Citizen were some of the most influential books to him. And so what he wanted to think about is, what if we set up at the school that results in about 30 students transferring out of the school each year, either by their choice or by the administration's choice, and why so many students of color were failing classes. And so this was his reflection. What is the system of our school? It's not what we think it does, it's what it actually does. So we thought that students were leaving because it was their problem. And we were looking at handbook policies and expecting by changing policies in the handbook things would change. They tinkered with the wrong levers, adjusting tardy policies and homework and dress codes. None of these changed the outcomes. So it's not the students, it's us. When we started looking at our actions and deeper structures of our organizations, we put ourselves inside the boundary of the system. We reviewed and changed our master schedule, adding professional development, shift to our teaching methods, revised the curricula, especially in history and English. I wish I could ask him what drew him to those two, but of course, English was his area of expertise. So perhaps that's one reason. Added rigor, which was also surprising. 4 years of English, math, science, 3 years of social science, AP and dual credit courses. Changed the support systems to start before students entered the 9th grade, and added a summer bridge from 9th grade to 10th grade so student skills levels could meet junior and senior courses. Organized meetings around student experiences. Students have typically been organized around, schools have been organized around teachers, but ought to be focused on students and their experience of school throughout the day and year. Meetings were originally set up in a typical college prep school idea, departments, budgets, standards. They shifted to team meetings every 2 weeks. For example, 9th grade teachers collaborating about struggling students, including counselors, homework loads, aligning curricular topics. Started a weekly student review team of administrators, counselors, and work study supervisors to focus on support for students close to the edge. How do we change our mental models? The most difficult thing to change is the mental models of administrators and teachers about what teaching should look like. Observation shifted from being about what teachers did to more about what students did. Moved away from Charlotte Danielson's framework to Ann Tonetti's and Garver's 17,000 classroom observations can't be wrong. I wish I could tell you more about that, but I don't know about it. Changed our teacher interview questions, kept the usual questions about knowledge and pedagogy, but delved into experience with student engagement and working as part of an instructional team. So he actually built a simple stock flow diagram of the school that helped him understand the school's deep organizational structure. And some conceptual understanding helped him frame questions. What are the persistent behaviors, good and bad, of our school? What are the structures that support student learning, especially for those below norms? So one thing I want to say is he found Richmond. So Barry Richmond wrote The Thinking in Systems Thinking, 8 critical skills, you know, the 10,000 meter view and dynamic thinking and operational thinking. It's all in this article. And I'm going to you can get this article free online. I'll put that in the chat. But Richmond in that article has a map of the learning process. Richmond liked to use stock flow mapping of metacognition on problems. So this is, I'm not going to go through it, but this is a map of the learning process that Barry Richmond put together in the article. And Tim modified this for his purposes, but he couldn't find his map. Otherwise, he would have sent it to me and I would have shown it. So this is the perspective of a principal who was trained as a teacher and used it in teaching, and then how he used those ideas when he became a principal. And so I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to take a minute to put in the chat.
I did it for you already, Diana. I did it for you.
Oh, Tracy, you're so good. There's a link in the chat to Barry Richmond's article. And I wish Tim could be here to answer questions because he's such a thoughtful person and very reflective. You know, just like Tracy, who spent a lot of time preparing for this particular presentation, for which we are very grateful. But I think it helps us to share how powerful this can be in environments that we don't generally have an experience of. I mean, I have no idea what a principal, although I did do a presentation to a bunch of Catholic elementary school principals on budget with a stock flow model, because tuition and maintaining students was an idea that was important to them. I think the big thing that Tracy and I would, and all of us would probably all say, is you have to speak the language of your audience. If you don't talk to them about problems that are important to them, we're not going to get anywhere. And the more we understand how to speak the language of our audience, I think the more successful we will be in helping them see the power of what we're trying to do. Anyway, I could quit talking so other people have a chance to say anything you would like or to ask Tracy any questions.
I'm also interested in hearing what other people have to say as what's worked and what hasn't worked. Like, just learn from your experiences.
Well, Tracy, I would like to say that in the 2 high schools where I set up pretty significant systems modeling classes, and we hired people or had people take over those positions when I left, and we had like 3 people teaching and stuff like that. It died out after a while. They didn't have the same passion. And so I like the fact that you have multiple ways to get into systems thinking. I think that's really important. But to keep something going, how do you keep something going when one of the major players leaves? I think in Emre's systems thinking group, they have a systems thinking association. So when one person leaves, that person goes to a different school. They're not by themselves. They still have a connection to the systems thinking association. And I think that happens with the Water Center for Systems Thinking. Even if the people you've trained go different places, they still have a connection to all that you guys have done. And so they still feel connected instead of isolated. That's kind of the other side of the story. How do you get something to stay that's been put into place and has been pretty successful when some of the major players leave? That's difficult also to answer. Yes,
You know,
Steve.
I have a similar question. I'm sorry Alan's gone because I think he might be able to speak to this a little bit. But Tracy, I know at Catalina Hills, you had a person on staff who was responsible for kind of keeping systems thinking up and going and modeling up and going. And I know that Alan and Rob have done the same. So I just wonder if that model works. I mean, we had the same issues at Lincoln Sudbury, is that I had one person who I actually got interested in doing some modeling, and then he left. And so I was left being the only person again. So those issues about people moving from place to place can be big.
So I think it works in the beginning. Like, they don't have, Catalina Foothills does not have a person anymore. When the grant money from the Waters Foundation went away, that position went away. And so Joan, was that person. Joan Yates, my colleague, was that person. But what was very intentional is it needs to be like in the culture of the practice. It can lose its name. It can lose the systems thinking term, but it's still, the tools are active, the language, the questions are active. You talk to kids and who are in some of those classes where they were building models, they were doing simulations and all, and you mentioned the term systems thinking, they go, is that what we were doing? And I mean, we had one student who ran for school board when she found out that was the exciting thing that she was doing, and she ran for school board, Tucson Unified School District, on a systems thinking platform, based on what she learned in middle school. So it has to be in the culture, and the culture means everyone, parents, kids, teachers, and there has to be structure for onboarding new employees to be prepared for changes in leadership and such. Like, some of our best examples of demo sites, like sites where people go and see, when the principal leaves, its expectation is a new principal has to agree to go through some capacity building in order to stay up with their teaching staff. So, and that's part of the expectation and the culture.
That's really great, Tracy. I think that's for continuity. I think you're right. It has to be in the culture. I talked to Alan for a while at one point and asked him why they quit doing a lot of spreading of systems thinking in Carlisle. And he said they got a new superintendent, and the new superintendent was just not interested. So unless the person you're hiring, that's, I think, one of the reasons getting your administration to buy into it is so important. Even if they leave, if you can get the structure, almost the constitution of the school, it becomes an amendment to the constitution of the school that this has to be supported going forward, and hiring someone with the different questions, you know, if they're hiring a new superintendent or hiring a new principal, what do they think about this thing that's been so successful in the school? Will they continue that? And of course, they could lie, but the fact of the matter is, if they're never asked, they come in with their own agenda. And it just changes everything. It makes it not easy to continue what you're trying to spread in the school.
But don't underestimate the power of a teacher leader, because my favorite story of all times that I didn't include is a school district, a large school district in North Carolina, where we were working and the teachers were very active in the classroom, and we had a trainer of trainer program and all of that. And there was activity on the school board that was resistant, that we were bringing. I mean, it was somewhat political. We were bringing communism because it's not school's job to teach kids how to think. I mean, I'll tell you, it was the most horrific school board meeting that they roasted me. And so it was done. We were done, and it was outlawed. And the superintendent couldn't believe it. And he left. 2 or 3 superintendents later, this is a 6-year span, a superintendent came in that seemed to be kind of interested in, and a teacher leader went and met with her because she was still doing stuff in her classroom and said, let me tell you about this, what we were doing a long time ago, and all the energy and activity and positivity. As of August, I think it was, this teacher leader has a district position, the director of systems thinking and innovation. And I was like, and that was, the power of one. And then everybody gloms on because they have that experience, but it was a while ago, so there's a lot of turnover. And so she's one of she went through our advanced facilitator program as well. So yeah, I mean, it's just right time, right moment.
I think you are seeing more bubble up, but we're not seeing quite as much, although they are in Turkey doing pretty good. I think what we're seeing is the exponential curve at the bottom. There's stuff there. We just don't see much movement, but I think there's an undercurrent there from the work that you've done. What, Tracy, 30 years now?
34.
34 years now. Yeah. So
I was a 13-year-old assistant principal. I'm kidding.
So I just, it's important work. So we just keep doing it, and it's worth our time. We know it's worth our time. You're seeing results. Me by myself, not so much, but try to help other people get moving forward as well. So, any other questions for Tracy? No? Tracy, this has been a wonderful experience. Thank you so much. And for all the hours you spent putting together your presentation, it's terrific.
Well, and I broke all my rules for words on slides. I broke all my rules for number of words on slides. So I apologize for that. So
that's okay. We can deal with it. So thank you very much for sharing this information. Thank you. If there are no other questions, I guess we ought to bring this to a close.
All right.
And
thanks, Tracy. Good to see you.
The second meeting.
It was great to see everyone.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.